Hallo YouTube, wir schauen jetzt DIY-Tech for Anarchists, Gadgets for People who don't trust the government. Mal gucken, um was es da geht. Wurde mir vorgeschlagen und nochmal gestern bei einer Runde TFT erklärt, dass ich das unbedingt gucken sollte. Folgt mir doch auf YouTube und lasst einen Daumen da, kommentiert mit 20 oder 23 Wörter, das ist die goldene Nummer. Denkt euch was aus oder schreibt einfach das kommunistische Manifest in den Kommentaren, das ist kostenlos online zu kriegen, könnt ihr euch durchlesen und hier runter posten. Wir gehen rein.
I am not using AI artwork. So someone you love is an anarchist and it's gift-giving season and you realize...
Warte, brauchen wir Untertitel? Braucht jemand Untertitel? Ja, komm, machen wir für euch, machen wir Untertitel an.
Ihr kommt alle ins Gulag nach der Revo.
Ey, herzlos Furry. Scheiße, jetzt sind hier auch noch die Furries.
Using AI artwork. So someone you love is an anarchist and it's gift-giving season and you realize that giving them that gift certificate to BetterHelp or maybe those Facebook camera goggles would result in them never speaking to you again. Maybe you're
Ich glaube, das ist ein Vorweihnachtsvideo.
the anarchist and this is a gift for yourself and that's totally fine. Everybody deserves a little bit of self-care regardless of why you're here. I'm here to help. And when I say anarchist, I'm not talking about somebody who live action role plays the purge every day of their lives.
Weil Anarchie ist nicht Purge? Oh oh.
Anarchism is formally defined as a philosophy that resists institutions that perpetuate authority, coercion, or hierarchy. And all the
Das ist Quatsch, Purge steht, also hätte ich Purge stehen müssen.
things that I'm about to show you in this video are closely related to that philosophy. So if you were expecting a DIY recipe for C4 or the best way to burn down banks, that's still a few months out. But if you're interested
It's still a few months out. Ey, ich glaube, ich soll den folgen auch.
in a $40 solar lawn light that connects you to a 100% free nationwide decentralized messaging network, or maybe an inexpensive way that you can pull imaging data directly from satellites and
Boah! Ey, das wird cool.
take a space selfie, or a tiny device that detects nearby
Ach so, Anarchie ist nicht Purge RP, hat er gesagt. Muss man schon ernst nehmen. Ah, so geht's. Sorry.
safety cameras, or maybe a $20 device that you can modify to let you know when ICE or law enforcement are tracking you via your mobile phone. And if that and a whole bunch of other goodies pique your interest, then take a seat, you're going to want to stick around, and you might even learn a little bit about anarchism in the process. Let's go.
Boah, ist das krass. Das ist ja richtig gut. Wir lernen heute was. Das ist dieser Bildungskontent, nach dem alle fragen. Schneid euch an, Leute. Ist das prüfungsrelevant? Alles hier ist prüfungsrelevant. Wichtige Frage, hattest du als Kind so ein Pflaster auf den Augen? Nee. Aber ich hatte so bunte Flicken an meinen Hosen.
When making a video about a subject or a philosophy, I like to start at the beginning. And this is why anarchism is so fascinating to think about, because its beginning precedes all political or government ideas. Animals are anarchists. A fox can hunt rabbits in Arizona and bring them home to its den in Mexico. All children are anarchists. When you bring a 5-year-old to a store, they choose not to steal a toy by weighing domestic and social consequences, not because they're afraid of their state incarcerating them. So in some ways, explaining the origin of anarchism would be a bit like explaining the origin of hunger or infatuation or...
Ja, aber es gibt ja auch Menschen, die sagen, man wird als Arschloch geboren so. Wir sind ja alles schlechte Menschen und wollen alle automatisch immer mehr. Das musst du da auch mit rein. Also die Genetik ist auch wichtig, Kollege.
envy. A valid argument is that we are all born as anarchists and we
Hattest du diesen Rattenschwanz? Nee, ich hatte keinen Rattenschwanz.
spend our lives being manipulated into appealing to authority, because if individuals didn't recognize authority, there would be no passive route to tremendous levels of power and wealth. For example, if you took Mark Zuckerberg with his $230 billion of private wealth and locked him in a room with every Croatian with their combined $230 billion of purchasing power parity, and if you ordered a gigantic pizza for everyone, I don't think that Mark would be able to convince the other 3.8 million people in the room that half of the pizza is rightfully his. But how
Boah, das ist ein gutes Beispiel. Der brauche ich nochmal. Das ist ja richtig gut, Alter.
no passive route to tremendous levels of power and wealth. For example, if you took Mark Zuckerberg with his $230 billion of private wealth and locked him in a room with every Croatian with their combined $230 billion of...
Ey, also ganz ehrlich, ich war mal einen Monat lang in Kroatien, da reicht ein Kroate. Da reicht mutmaßlich einer.
purchasing power parity, and if you ordered a gigantic pizza for everyone, I don't think that Mark would be able to convince the other 3.8 million people in the room that half of the pizza is rightfully his. But outside
12-jähriger aber ist so.
of this hypothetical pizza party, through our hierarchical and institutionalized lenses, most of us recognize the absurd idea that Zuck is as valuable as everyone and everything in Croatia, which then
Obwohl Zuckerberg, BJJ, vielleicht schafft er es. Oh, ja, stimmt.
begs the
stimmt.
question, why doesn't Mark Zuckerberg just buy Croatia and make it his private residence? And this is where we'd revert back to our anarchist firmware, because I'd assume that most Croatians value their homes more than they value hierarchical institutions.
Gemacht, Alter. Richtig Spaß an das Video.
We gotta start this off with what is about the most obvious anarchist-friendly tech that everybody should be using, while an alarmingly small amount of people even know about. Meshtastic.
Meshtastic ist klasse. Ich habe mich gestern mit einem Forscher darüber unterhalten. War ein Scherz, war heute waschen. Und ich überlege schon sehr lange, mir einen Meshtastic-Point zuzulegen mit Solarzelle auf dem Kopf und ein paar Batterien. Da habe ich richtig Bock drauf. Richtig Bock drauf. Und das Ding würde mich vielleicht ein Huni kosten oder so, wenn ich ein bisschen sparsam umgehe mit den Teilen und ein bisschen was drucke. Und dann könnte ich das einfach im Garten stellen und das würde einfach autark laufen.
I'll get a little bit more technical in a bit, but Meshtastic, which kind of sounds like a subscription service that would sponsor this video, is the polar opposite of that. It is a freely available, completely decentralized mesh network that uses radio signals for encrypted messaging. And generally speaking, the more people who use it, the more robust and far-reaching and reliable it gets. You don't need an internet connection, you don't need a SIM card, you don't need a license or any type of subscription or registration to anything whatsoever. There are sexy standalone devices like this LilyGo e-ink messenger and
Geil, Alter, da gibt's schon Devices. Als ich noch drinne war, gab es so ein Ding, das sah ein bisschen aus wie ein Blackberry. Aber das LilyGo E-Ink-Ding ist ja richtig geil, Alter. Das will ich haben.
plenty of other options, but
Warte mal, ich bin Freund. LilyGo E-Ink. Also, guck mal. Richtig gut, hab eins erlaufen. Was kosten der? Also, das Ding kostet $92, das ist ja nix. Ich glaube, ich kaufe mir so einen. Ähm, Irgendwer hat geschrieben, richtig gut, habe auch eins am Laufen. Ja, voll. Und wenn ihr auf günstig geht, so, braucht ihr eigentlich nur ein kleines Gerät und das könnt ihr mit dem Handy verbinden über eine App. So. Und das Ding kostet nicht mal, also ich glaube, 15 Euro oder so. Wenn ihr auf Budget geht, so, weißt du? Das ist so wild, Alter, wie billig du da reinkommst. So.
most
Du
people
musst,
just
du musst kein 100-Euro-Gerät kaufen. Du kannst auch das billige und mit einer App über das Handy das steuern. Das geht richtig gut, du brauchst da keinen Bildschirm.
use something like this, which you can connect via Bluetooth on your phone or
Ja gut, erzählt er jetzt auch noch, ja.
computer. And the cost of entry for Meshtastic
Mach Spendengoin? Nee, Quatsch.
is about $25 to $40 if you're ordering off of Amazon, and as little as $10 if you're willing to wait for the slow boat to arrive from China. Maybe you don't have a single anarchist
Hä? Erklär doch mal, was das jetzt ist. Also, ach so, Szene, sorry. Nur bitte. Sorry. Wir sehen nur dich. Ja, also Meshtastic ist sowas wie ein Funkgerät, was gleichzeitig auch Funksignale verschlüsselt weiterschickt. So. Wenn du zum Beispiel in einer Demo bist, dann empfängst du vielleicht nicht den, der vorne ist, und nicht den, empfängt der vorne ist, nicht direkt der hinten ist. Aber wenn dazwischen einer hängt, der auch Meshtastic nutzt, kannst du über den eine Nachricht schleifen zu den hinten. Und du kannst dir zum Beispiel, wenn du jetzt ein Haus hast, kannst du dir so eine Kiste auf ein Dach setzen. Oder wenn du ein Grundstück hast oder ein Mast oder ein Gelände, dann kannst du den nur als Empfänger und Repeater laufen lassen, dass du das Funksignal über weitere Strecken sendest. So. Und da gibt's auch eine geile Map. Warte mal. Wie heißt die? Wo war ich denn gestern? Warte mal, da muss man die Zähne nochmal wechseln. Das kann ich hier nicht auf den kleinen Fenster hier. So, hier. Voll gut, wird bestellt. Hier, Meshmap. Da kannst du zum Beispiel gucken, wer bei dir in der Nähe einen Repeater hat. Du kannst die Repeater, die kannst du auch mit dem Internet verbinden. So, und dann können die sich mit anderen Repeatern, die auch über das Internet verbunden sind, kommunizieren. Und damit kannst du dein Netzwerk machen. Ist halt scheiße, wenn das Internet ausfällt, aber wenn das Internet ausfällt, hast du ja trotzdem noch, kannst du ja trotzdem gucken, ob du noch eine Line von dir zu den anderen Meshtastic-Devices kriegst. Diese Teile haben halt kein GPS-Internetzugriff und per SIM-Karte auf Personen zuzuführen. Genau, so. Und also es gibt welche, die haben GPS für solche Repeater-Sachen und so, das kannst du auch einstellen, aber musst du halt nicht. Du kannst halt auch ohne GPS nutzen. So.
Or any type of subscription or registration to anything whatsoever. There are sexy standalone devices like this LilyGo e-ink messenger and
Das Ding ist geil, ich glaube, ich kaufe mir einen. Habe ich gerade schon gesagt.
plenty of other options, but most people just use something like this, which you can connect via Bluetooth on your phone or computer. And the cost of entry for Meshtastic
Das Witzige ist auch, ich war letztens auf TikTok in so einem Morse-Code, in einer Morse-Code-Meta, und weil ich ja auch Tastaturen so spannend finde, habe ich überlegt, ob ich mir Morse-Code beibringe. Aber ich bin mir noch nicht sicher. Aber es wäre schon witzig, wenn ich so mit der ISS Morse-Coden könnte. Piep, 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 piep.
is about $25 to $40 if you're ordering off of Amazon, and as little as $10 if you're willing to wait for the slow boat to arrive from China. Maybe you don't have a single anarchist bone in your body. You have WhatsApp and text messaging, and you get a data signal just about everywhere you go. Why the hell would you need Meshtastic? Allow me to answer that question with an example. If you look at the Meshtastic network to see the nodes that you can connect to, you'll notice that this is a very popular trend in North Carolina and that part of the East Coast. That's because last year, unfortunately, Hurricane Helene quickly demonstrated the need for off-grid communication, and people who had Meshtastic devices were using the network to help organize aid for their communities and find out what was going on. The idea that a $30 investment could keep you in touch with not only friends and family members, but the outside world in the event that a catastrophe knocks out power
Good point.
or connectivity isn't exactly preppership. Realistically, in that setting, it's more useful than a weather radio. And while there are seemingly unlimited amounts of Meshtastic hardware options out there, I'm going to be making two of them. The first is a simple lawn solar light that acts as a connectable Meshtastic node that I'll spend a total of $30 to $40 on. And the other is a solar-powered community base station or repeater node that I'll spend a
Ich sehe schöne Synths. Nee, du siehst keine Synths. Du siehst, ich weiß nicht, haben wir gestern, warst du da auch dabei? Der redet jetzt über Meshtastic.
little over $100 on. Okay, so how this all works explained as quickly as possible, starting from the very bottom and working our way up using my favorite thing in the world, stupid metaphors.
How Meshtastic works in 90 seconds.
Light waves are
Moin
a
Ronny.
form of electromagnetic waves, and we can only see a tiny fraction of them. And
Alter, ich folge den, der ist so gut, Alter. Der hat 1 Million Abonnenten, das ist ja wild, Alter. Gefällt mir jetzt schon richtig gut, das Video, der ist super. Und der sieht ein bisschen aus wie Jim Carrey.
the light in this video is between 400 and 800 terahertz, but way down in the gigahertz range, you're getting your cell phone or Wi-Fi signal enabling you to watch this video. Now let's slow down the frequency of those waves to 915 megahertz, which is 915 million of these lumps and dips per second. Okay, so you may know that if you have a harp or a guitar or some type of string instrument and you play the same frequency of the strings, it'll start vibrating and ringing out on its own. Well, that's resonance, and that's exactly what's happening when electromagnetic waves of a certain frequency hit an appropriately sized antenna. And by demodulating ones and zeros from those waves, we can get digital radio, broadcast television, mobile data, and of course, Meshtastic. Now imagine that you have a walkie-talkie and your friend has another walkie-talkie all the way across the country. The radio waves on the walkie-talkie frequency are going to die out long before they get anywhere close to your friend, so that's obviously not going to work. But what if you, your friend, and 10,000 other walkie-talkie users all over the country were on the same frequency accepting and rebroadcasting all of the data being transmitted on it? If you only send encrypted text or location messages on this gigantic mesh of users that only your friend can decode, well, that's exactly what Meshtastic is. And
Ich sehe dafür aus wie ein Rotate. Oh, stimmt, ein bisschen schon.
it's completely free. You keep the network up and running through participation. I only want to build mesh communicators that will work indefinitely, so being solar powered is an obvious way to accomplish this. And a gentleman by the name of Travis Gustafson showed off a Meshtastic node that operated within a cheap solar lawn light, so that's the perfect place to start. So I picked up a rack wise block bare circuit board and a few different types of solar lights to experiment, and everything else was just spare parts around my lab. It seems like most of this stuff can be crammed into the solar panel itself, so in most cases, you don't even need to use the lamp. It's not even necessary. Unsurprisingly, there's a rechargeable 18650 flashlight battery powering the thing, which gives us 3.7 volts that we need for the WISE block. And first, let's drill an antenna hole for the connector, and then let's solder the WISE block to the battery terminals, and done. If you want to keep things super simple, you could be done right here. You could just screw the thing back together, connect via Bluetooth, and communicate through a decentralized network through a $7 lawn light. There are a few things that we could easily improve. We might as well use an antenna from an
Oh, stimmt, da hinten waren trotzdem Synthesizer. Jetzt habe ich sie gesehen.
old 2.4 gigahertz router for Bluetooth so we can message from farther away. We can just get rid of this, drill another hole, and we're good. Now, if there's a huge downpour, I could see some drops of water getting in through these antenna ports, so let's put some silicone sealant around them. And while we're at it, let's use the empty space in the lamp casing to put a pair of 3300 milliamp hour batteries instead of this 1500 milliamp hour one, giving us 4.4 times more battery life to help us keep this thing on during a really cloudy week with no direct sunshine. And while we're at it, just in case we have a nuclear winter or you decide to use this indoors or something, we might as well utilize a battery holder with a USB charge port as a backup. We need to reverse the schematic and rearrange and resolder all these wires so the solar panel charge controller will be feeding into our new battery rig. And there you have it, a mostly covert, self-sustaining Meshtastic node for anywhere between 25 and 50 bucks, depending on how many of my luxurious add-ons you put into it. And if you bend the antennas down, it looks extremely inconspicuous. And when our solar lawn lights are banned because ICE found out that people are using them for encrypted off-the-grid communication, I am more than happy to participate in an arms race of how many common household items I can cram a comms setup inside. Now let's turn it up a notch. Obviously, mesh communication becomes more powerful when you can connect to more nodes. And if you wanted to drastically and quickly increase the range of your solar lamp, you could just mount it up in a high place, like next to a gutter or something. But I'm afraid that if you live in a rural or semi-rural area, that lawn lamp isn't going to cut it. So we need a 12-watt solar panel, a mount for the panel, a waterproof electronics box, a big-ass 915 megahertz antenna, an antenna cable, a Heltec Meshtastic device, and 2 rechargeable batteries offering around 7,000 milliamp hours. We don't really need to worry about extended Bluetooth connectivity because remember, this isn't a Meshtastic user node, but a repeater node. I should only have to set it up once and then never bother with it again. Safely mounting and grounding an antenna is always a bit of a pain in the ass, but the rest was astonishingly easy, and I immediately picked up a whole lot more nodes in the southeast. And it's worth mentioning that my compound here is on top of a small mountain, and now I kind of want to build a tower up here that would connect all of Atlanta. Come to think
Boah,
of it, I'm going to put this on my videos
macht mich schon ein bisschen hart.
to consider list
Antennen aufbauen.
for 2026. By the way, you don't have to use Meshtastic on this build. There's also MeshCore, which offers some advantages in efficiency and encryption at the expense of range and ease of use. If you wanted to use that instead, it's as simple as plugging the radio board into your computer via USB and changing the firmware. Unfortunately, there seems to be a whole lot of astroturfing about this because why the hell would anybody be able to enjoy anything on the internet? So it's actually really hard to find objective information between the two protocols. My advice is that if you're new to this and you don't already have a community of friends using it, then Meshtastic would be a great gateway for most users. If it's not working well, the default settings are not for everyone, and there's a whole lot of quick changes you can make in the app that drastically change performance. If you already have a bunch of people that you can locally connect to that use MeshCore, then give that a try and ask them to give you the ideal settings for your area. Just remember, one is not superior to the other, and anybody claiming so is full of shit. The good news is that it costs you literally nothing to try out different protocols, and exploration is encouraged. Anyway, DIY Meshtastic devices would make a fantastic gift for just about anyone, anarchist or not, and hopefully one day when we've rejected mass surveillance, all of these flock cameras can become decentralized repeater nodes. But until then, I've spent a soul-crushing amount of time making videos on this channel covering flock safety's uncomfortable omnipresence and 50+ security vulnerabilities, but one thing that I never really touched on was how to detect, log, and track hidden flock safety cameras in the first place. Fortunately, a hacker by the name of Colonel Panic, with the help of GainsSec, had explored this and came up with a pretty amazing solution appropriately called FlockU that runs on a Wii spy device. And it looks like this. It would truly be a controversy if I didn't have ESP32 featured somewhere in this video. ESP32 is basically a series of super inexpensive low-power microcontrollers with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth connectivity. Most of the libraries are
Ein ESP32 habe ich auch hier. Nee, findet ihr Gerät gerade nicht. Keine Ahnung, wo das liegt. Hier? Nee. Nee, kann ich leider nicht zeigen, mein ESP32. Warte mal, kannst du hier liegen? Hier. Ja, wir haben's. Hier. Das ist ein Gerät, damit kannst du so, das für so WLAN-Hacking, so. Für Testzwecke. Die-Outer. Kann man Die-Outer nennen, aber ich glaube, ich weiß nicht. Aber ja, so den habe ich. Der ist witzig, der ist klein, der ist cute. Brauchst ein USB-Kabel ranmachen, dann klickst hier durch, was du machen willst und dann easy peasy lemon squeezy. So, wollte ich mal
Fully
zeigen.
open source, and for the few that aren't, there's a large community reverse engineering them to make it so. Depending on where you're getting them, ESP32 boards can cost as little as $5. Or for example, here's a 32-bit dual core board with an AI camera module that has object recognition built in. It also has a digital microphone, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and battery charging chip. This costs under $20. Generally speaking, if you have an idea for a portable connectable device, 4 out of 5 times, ESP32 hardware will be what turns that idea into a functional prototype. The Wii Spy device is basically an ESP32 S3 chip with a buzzer and some custom printed PCB. It runs about $22.50 for the 2 PCBs and around $70 for the fully assembled device. And this is a bargain when you consider that depending on what firmware you're loading on it, it could be a device that exploits unitary humanoid and dog robots, or a radio direction finding device, or a fox hunter, or a drone tracker and identifier that can monitor and log up to 8 drones at once. And of course, a flock safety camera recognizer and detector that uses datasets of device IDs ranging from ALPR cameras to acoustic surveillance devices to detect and log them into a mapped database. And as one would expect, it makes a little noise when it detects a flock device, and it even has a heartbeat sensor to let you know your proximity to it while driving or walking around.
What? Oh, there it is.
It's easy to set up. Even on Windows, if you have Python installed, you just install Platform.io core and then set up a virtual environment and then run a Python script that gets everything up and running for you. That actually sounds a little bit complicated, but it's really just like 2 commands and 2 clicks. Then you just head over to your web browser of choice and you have a GUI with various customizations and a map to keep all of your detected devices, which you can choose to share to larger databases like dflock. You can mount it in your car, 3D print a keychain, hook up a larger antenna, or even buy a retro punk rock patch from Kernel Panic with one embedded inside it. I personally decided to go completely apeshit and print out a rifle-like handle for a directional Wi-Fi Yagi antenna that's connected
Grüße dann mir.
to an alpha network card between the nozzle and the Wii Spy. Now, just to taper your expectations a bit, the flock detection isn't perfect, as the database needs to be updated to catch the most recent camera models, and obviously the device is typically not going to detect a camera until it's in range where it's already visible to you. But more importantly for this list, open ESP32 devices like this not only have plenty of alternate firmwares with new uses, but they're practically screaming to be customized. I can almost guarantee that my Wii Spy will be doing something completely different this time next year. Customizable hardware and open source is truly the gift that keeps on giving.
Let's chat about anarchism.
A frequent narrative with anarchism is a person or a group of people opting to not participate in authoritative rule that threatens their free will. So more often than not, historians refer to notable anarchist communities by how much of a problem those in power had with those communities. A wonderful example of this in history would be the Taborites. Back in the early 15th century, a famous philosopher and motivational speaker by the name of Jan Hus had some reformative ideas about the Catholic Church and was promised safe passage to Prague to share and debate them. And by safe passage, the Catholic Church meant safely tethered to a stake while being lit on fire. This pissed off a lot of Hus's fans, and they decided to move out to the woods and start a little town called Tabor, about 50 miles south of Prague. In this community, somewhere between 10 and 15,000 people, aka the Taborites, created the weirdest flags in history. They also decided that there would be no servants or peasants. Everybody would chip in and have the same opportunities. There would be no taxation, and there would be no property that wasn't collectively owned by everyone. This not only could be the first anarchist society, but the first communist one. The
Hört sich chillig an auch.
Catholic Church has notoriously never been one to vibe with societies not believing what the Catholic Church believes, so they ordered the Taborites to be drowned. The Taborites fended off not 1 crusade, not 2 crusades, but 5 crusades in what would eventually be known as the Hussite Wars. A cool 100 years after that, a slam poetry performer named Martin Luther was inspired by Jan Hus and Taborite ideas, and he literally pirated the Bible so unordained people could read it, which led to European Reformation, which more or less ended the Middle Ages and brought in the modern age. Anyway. So like most of us, sometimes you want to know if it's going to rain later today. So you take a quick peek at a weather site or app, and after sifting through nearly 50 megabytes of auto-playing videos, ads, and clickbait, you get to see this. Now, if you didn't want to see as many ads and garbage, most major weather platforms offer monthly or yearly subscriptions. But here's the thing. You already paid for this information with your tax dollars. And for the most part, private weather forecasting is just repurposing and monetizing data from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and the NWS, the National Weather Service. Virtually anybody with an internet connection can freely access weather forecasts, warnings, maps, satellite imagery, and radar. If you have a weather fetish, you can feast your eyes on sexy things like convective outlooks and current mesoscale discussions. And it needs to be pointed out that the National Weather Service leads the
Wenn Anarchisten wieder Plattenrüstung tragen, wäre ich dabei. Kriegen wir hin.
world in forecasting and warning of catastrophic weather
Wir haben schon Schmied, ne? Einen Schmied haben wir schon. Ich wollte es dir noch sagen. Schmied ist anwesend.
events and data acquisition and analysis. And NOAA is used as a vital asset for forecasting and research by nearly every country in the world. It's truly something that Americans can be proud of. So what happens if one day weather.gov or NOAA.gov is taken offline? Well, since virtually every commercial weather service relies on that data, they'd be bouncing between shared European data and the Farmer's Almanac. Or what happens if there's a mass power or internet outage due to a hurricane or some type of catastrophic weather event? Well, I have some good news. There are 15 NOAA imaging and research satellites hanging out in the sky. And in my case, for the east side of the United States, it'll be up there doing its thing for the next 15 years, whether your tyrannical government likes it or not. And the best part that way too few people realize is a thing is that you can access this data directly from the satellite for as little as $50 if you just want to hold an antenna and get a quick weather forecast, and closer to $190 if you want a permanent uplink that downloads high-resolution real-time data. And that data consists of everything from visible light photography of the entire planet to long-wave reflections to dust and wind analysis. And all of this
Ich möchte das jetzt irgendwie haben, aber ich brauche es nicht, ne? Das ist so, weißt du, das gucke ich mir an und denke mir, wäre schon geil, das zu haben, aber ich brauche es nicht. Und wenn ich es habe, würde ich es nie nutzen, so.
is unlimited with no cell phone tower, internet, or radio license required. Okay, the first thing you need to do is pick out a satellite, and this is actually way more fun and less confusing than it sounds. There's a completely free and frankly incredible program called Skyroof where you can punch in your location and it gives you a rundown of where they all are, what frequency they're operating on, and when and where they'll be accessible to you. If you're new at this, I'm going to recommend GOES, which stands for Geostationary Operational Environmental Satellites. The key word here is geostationary, meaning that you probably have one somewhere above your head in the same spot 20
Es geht darum, das Potenzial, es zu tun, was so befriedigend ist. So.
24 hours a day, 365 days per year. The most challenging part of this whole project is going to be pointing a dish or antenna precisely at a satellite, so not having a moving object is incredibly convenient. But once you're comfortable with that process, there's a pretty wide range of satellites that you can track and scoop data from relatively affordably. For this video, I wanted to keep everything as easy as possible and relatively affordable, so I used a new Elect GOES weather satellite bundle that I got for under $200. It comes with the dish, a pole mount,
Hört sich aber schon nach Spaß an, ich sag's dir.
cables, a software-defined radio capable of reaching the required frequencies, and a filter and amplifier combo called the Sawbird Plus. And that little notch filter really does ease the amount of time you would spend tinkering or fine-tuning this project. Quite possibly the most important thing to consider with this project that unfortunately a lot of people take shortcuts on is that if you're planning on setting up the hardware indoors and then running the antenna cable outside, you're going to have a much lower signal-to-noise ratio. The filter or amp needs to be as close to the dish as possible, otherwise that long cable that you're running outside is just turning into a noisy antenna that the amp is amplifying that has nothing to do with satellites. I'm now realizing that this sounds way more complicated than it is when I'm putting it into words. I am running one powered Ethernet cable outside from my computer, and then there's just a daisy chain of things going into the satellite dish. So it's actually very simple. What is not as simple is aligning the dish. Okay, so in my case, on the East Coast, the closest and most visible is GOES 19, which is just southeast of me. Head to dishpointer.com and punch in your address and satellite. Zoom in, and you'll be able to find a general idea of where you'll be aiming, which will help you decide where to put the dish. Obviously, you want to put it in a place where you have a clear line of sight view of the place in the sky where the satellite is. And write down these numbers and the true azimuth and elevation, as this will come in handy. I used a compass app called Compass. Make sure that you calibrate your phone or tablet first by doing the figure 8 thing and then match up your azimuth and elevation at the location of your dish. In my case, there was a squirrel's nest at the top of a tree just under where I needed to be aiming. At first, I used an RF spectral analyzer and then a portable SDR radio and
Haben wir alle da.
wasted about an hour trying to lock in a signal. Do me a favor and learn from my mistakes, save yourself some time, and just get a laptop or an Android phone or tablet and have it run free software called SatDump, as it'll let you know
Alles das, um das Wetter zu wissen. Um immer das Wetter zu wissen. Ja, natürlich.
your signal-to-noise ratio at that exact frequency. It's also obviously really handy to have the actual decoder you'll be running while doing the alignment, so you're not wondering if you could have done a better job later. Finally, we're ready to cook. We'll
Peter Tustenger war gerade so sauer.
want to load up
Ja,
SatDump's
super.
UI, select your SDR, and punch in
Aber
your
schon.
dose frequency, which is frequently 1694.1 megahertz. Then you select your satellite and mode, in this case goes HRIT, and keep an eye on the signal-to-noise ratio down here. Anything above 1 decibel works, anything above 3 or 4 decibel works reliably. Mine was actually pretty bad at first, but it's still
Ich glaube, mit GSPler brauchst du nicht über Ästhetik und Coolness philosophieren. Ich glaube, das spielt für den gar keine Rolle.
synced and downloaded images just fine. And if everything went smoothly, you'll be downloading high-resolution images and forecast data within a few minutes. I literally just let mine run overnight so I could build a time-lapse. Beautiful.
Ist es geil.
And if you get super into this
Ist
and make a
es
hobby out of it,
geil.
spending a few $100 on a better SDR will give you a much lower noise floor and a higher bitrate, which allows you to connect to other modes that deliver more high-resolution images, videos, and measurements.
Ist es
And really,
geil.
honestly,
Und das alles nur? Das ist doch geil, Mann, Alter. Stell dir vor, du kannst solche Sachen selber erzeugen, Alter. Mit dem Zeug, den du gebastelt, eingerichtet und gearbeitet hast. Das ist doch richtig geil, Alter.
the reason that this is such a good gift is because it opens the door to software-defined radio, which is an absolute treasure chest of independently run projects and experiments, not to mention an instant and accessible gateway to explore the crazy and active world of modern radio. By the way, I posted a little clip of this to Instagram and got some messages telling me to check out Save It for Parts, which turns out to be a hugely underappreciated YouTube channel that is a goldmine of projects like this, primarily using objects that would have otherwise been discarded. And if like $200 is too much for you to invest right now and you really want to try this out, there are a whole lot of unused satellite dishes out there that people would love for you to haul off their property. Save It for Parts is the guy and YouTube channel that can show you how to set all that up.
Anarchism.
Back in the early 2000s, I was really sick of January in Chicago, and I had very few responsibilities and a brand new credit card, so I decided to drive to Guatemala, and I took an adventurous route, which led through a lot of morditas, which is a nice word for being stopped
Ich bekomme seit neuestem so Anti-GSPler-Memes. Was hat es mit GSPlern auf sich? Hab mich damit auseinandergesetzt, bevor ich den... Ach so, nicht auseinandergesetzt. Ja, Mensch, das hast du jetzt davon. Das hast du jetzt davon, Alter. Schon scheiße auch. Imagine, Alter. GSPler sind so welche, die Revolution aufheben haben und sich denken, ey, jetzt machen wir nur noch Buchclub und dann sterben wir irgendwann alle. Ich glaube, so, das erklärt GSPler am besten, Alter. Wenn du denkst, ey, für eine Revo bin ich eh zu faul, so, da muss ich ja aufstehen und mich bewegen, Alter, wirst du GSPler und diskutierst einfach andere Leute zu Tode, Alter, bis du dann irgendwann in eine Kiste fällst oder erschossen wirst. Weißt du?
by corrupt police and negotiating a fee for your freedom. But there was nothing that could psychologically prepare me for being stopped at a roadblock and seeing a sign like this: Rebels. Jungle Rebels. Admittedly, I didn't know much about Jungle Rebels at the time, but I knew that it was probably not good for my life expectancy. The armed guards at the roadblock asked me where I was headed, and I told them that I was staying in San Cristobal, a nearby city, and they told me that the route on my map wasn't good and drew me a different one. And then they shook my hand and assured me that I was safe and told me to not be anxious about shopping or eating in rebel territory or asking questions, and they just asked that I remained respectful. Unfortunately, their reassurance didn't do very much to ease my anxiety, and I tried to get out of rebel territory as quickly as possible. And that is one of my biggest regrets in life, because I knew nothing about the Zapatista movement at the time, and I definitely didn't realize that I had traveled to an autonomous
Das brauche
zone.
ich nochmal. Das ist ja cool. Schauen wir die Geschichte einfach nochmal an. Ja. Warum schluckst du das einfach, was Bob da sagt? Weil ich das sehr überzeugend gesagt habe und du ein Pfeife bist, Peter. Einfach ist die Sache. Ey, mach doch mal ein Argument drauf und sag dann dir einfach, dass er das schluckt. Dicker.
Anarchism.
Back in the early 2000s, I was really sick of January in Chicago, and I had very few responsibilities and a brand new credit card, so I decided to drive to Guatemala. And I took an adventurous route, which led through a lot of morditas, which is a nice word for being stopped by corrupt police and negotiating a fee for your freedom. But there was nothing that could psychologically prepare me for being stopped at a roadblock and seeing a sign like this: Rebels. Jungle rebels. Admittedly, I didn't know much about jungle rebels at the time, but I knew that it was probably not good for my life expectancy. The armed guards at the roadblock asked me where I was headed, and I told them that I was staying
Oh, kann jemand Spanisch? Ja, verstehe ich nicht, aber ist cool.
in San Cristobal, a nearby city,
Lange
and they
überlegt.
told me that the route on my map wasn't good and drew me a different one. And then they shook my hand and assured me that I was safe and told me to not be anxious about shopping or eating in rebel territory or asking questions, and they just asked that I remained respectful. Unfortunately, their reassurance didn't do very much to ease my anxiety, and I tried to get out of rebel territory.
Zapatistas sind geil, Stämme. Schau dir mal die marxistische Gruppe an. Wir können auch Praxis, müssen halt Jünger wieder, das sind... Ja. Komm, Alter. Ey, du bist wie so ein 20-Jähriger in so einem Minigolfclub mit einem Haufen Rentner, Alter, die sich ja für 5.000 € Bälle kaufen und sagst so, ey, da müssen nur ein paar Junge wieder rein, das ist wieder alles voll fresh, Alter. So funktioniert das nicht, Alter. Ihr sitzt da rum und redet über Bücher, ganz ehrlich. War langweilig, knallt doch null, Alter. Ihr wisst nicht mal, wie man Molly baut.
As quickly as possible, and that is one of my biggest regrets in life because I knew nothing about the Zapatista movement at the time, and I definitely didn't realize that I had traveled to an autonomous zone that didn't answer to the Mexican government or any government for that matter. The Zapatista Army of National Liberation, fueled by the experience of poverty and mistreatment of indigenous people, firmly rejected the North American Free Trade Agreement. This 300,000 plus member
In Altersheim gibt lecker Kuchen.
community didn't want to overthrow the Mexican government, they just didn't want to be part of it anymore, and they were prepared to fight for this freedom. The 8 Zapatista principles are:
Wäre das möglich, einen Videolink zu bekommen? Du kannst Ausrufezeichen, warte, ich mache es für dich, weil ich ein netter bin auch. So. Und was soll man gegen das bürgerliche Bewusstsein tun? Ey, du kannst schon Leute aufklären, aber ey, langweil die doch nicht mit irgendwelchen Kleinigkeiten und lange Geschwafel, Alter. Du musst doch keinen Vortrag halten, um zu erzählen, um den Leuten beizubringen, dass sie gefickt werden, so. Da brauchst du ja keine 200 Seiten, Alter. Das kannst du in 5 Minuten erklären. So, ihr werdet gefickt. Schaut euch mal um, ihr Vollidioten.
in no particular order through my dodgy translation. Don't command your community, obey it. Don't impose ideas, propose them. Represent your community instead of speaking for them. This one is the most difficult to translate and explain. Go down and don't go up, meaning that new ideas should always challenge traditional forms of power and take the most vulnerable into consideration. Any Zapatistas watching this, feel free to tear me a new asshole in the comments if I'm butchering this. Construction should always be prioritized over destruction. Everything for everyone, nothing for ourselves. And finally, we want a world where many worlds fit, meaning that you empower the community by recognizing and learning from the struggles of marginalized individuals. It's also important to note that
Knall doch.
Zapatista communities have always refused help, aid, charity, or any dependence from outside sources. They view their complete sustainability as a vital role in their autonomy. Now, despite being a successfully functioning society without aid, state, police, or participation in global capitalism, if you asked a Zapatista if they were an anarchist, they would likely say no, because it's a European term and they have no interest in being defined by European terms. Fair enough. So in a region teeming with poverty, substance abuse, and drug cartels, even by national standards, how is it that this area of Chiapas remained one of the safest places in Mexico without a single police officer or prison? This is accomplished through community justice. If a
Verrückt, Leute, wa? Verrückt, dass
crime
sowas
is committed,
funktioniert.
there are 3 levels of appeal. Level 1, the local community. If someone commits petty theft, vandalism, or something minor, an unpaid, temporarily elected community agent encourages all parties in the dispute to talk it out and reach a conclusion and a handshake. If there's a more serious crime or dispute that can't be solved locally, a regional group is formed from a rotating body of elected authorities to investigate the facts and propose a resolution. And if that's not working, you go to level 2, a trial. There's no attorneys allowed, there's no court fees. The rotating body of authorities propose a solution that satisfies the victim and the community. And then sometimes level 3, if needed, a punishment. usually in the form of restitution, community service, or re-education, which consists of lengthy private communication with the elders, which I guess is kind of like therapy. And if you refuse your punishment, there's a lot of social stigma, which is actually pretty unbearable in a small collective community. And in the very rare extreme cases, the nuclear option is expulsion. You lose your place in the community and you are free to experience a terrible life as an indigenous criminal in Mexico. This sounds like I'm describing a peaceful utopia, but on day one of the Zapatistas declaring independence in 1994, the Mexican government deployed as many as 70,000 troops to Chiapas that used tanks and helicopters to bomb Zapatista villages. And after 12 days of this violence leading to enormous protests in Mexico City, they eased up but remained stationed surrounding the autonomous zones. And also, since the hobby of violently attacking defenseless indigenous villages comes with international outrage, the government started funding paramilitary groups instead that paid and armed other indigenous people in the region who carried out attacks on Zapatista communities. A lot of these attacks specifically were operations that assaulted women or burned crops. And in Actil, the paramilitaries entered a church and murdered 45 pacifist Zapatista sympathizers while they were praying. Most of them were women and children. It took 23 years for the Mexican government to admit responsibility and apologize to the victims' families in 2020. Over the last 2 decades, constant ideological attacks in combination with unchecked cartel violence on open community centers eventually forced the dissolution of autonomous municipalities. In other words, as far as I can tell, the experiment's over, despite it kind of being successful.
Stingray detector.
So a little bit of backstory is required. Every device that connects to a cellular network, and even some that do not, have an IMSI, which stands for International Mobile Subscriber
Ey, Stingray-Geräte sind richtig witzig, Alter. Die fahren rum und gaukeln vor die Telefonnetz.
identity. A mobile phone network operator can triangulate and track the location of devices using this number, and to prevent misuse or even scarier stuff from happening, most of the time the provider issues a TMSI, or temporary mobile subscriber identity. So generally, if the police or ICE wants to track an individual on a cellular network like T-Mobile, they have to supply T-Mobile with a judicial warrant. And that judicial warrant requires probable cause that a crime has been or will be committed, and typically requires a complete context of the situation and specifics regarding what is being searched or tracked. It's just that when James Madison wrote the Fourth Amendment, he clearly wasn't taking police officers' feelings or convenience into consideration. But the Fourth Amendment gets really annoying for ICE agents, as being an undocumented person isn't actually a crime at all. It's a civil violation. As of November of 2025, over 2/3 of ICE arrests are of individuals with no criminal convictions. So what do you do when you've taken a job as an ICE agent and now have orders to detain people who aren't suspected of committing crimes? The best option would be to find a more respectable job, like a used car salesman or a lobbyist, or I suppose another option would be voluntary euthanasia. But if you're following tradition, then you'll use taxpayer money to buy devices that make phony cell phone towers that track people using their devices' IMSI. One brand name of such devices is Stingray.
Hast du eigentlich, was? Hast du den T34? Nee, der hat noch nicht gebaut. Der steht aber hier, warte, ich kann ihn zeigen. Yay. Ich weiß noch nicht, wann ich das mache. Da brauche ich einen ruhigen Moment für, da brauche ich auch Headspace für. Sieht schon geil aus. Mal gucken.
Or Kingfish, but there are plenty of options available from various vendors. They operate as a man-in-the-middle attack, such as the ones that I've highlighted in previous videos when hacking wireless routers. In this case, you're tricking people's devices into connecting to a phony cell phone tower by broadcasting a stronger signal than the real one, and in populated areas, this can amount to thousands of innocent people who are completely unrelated to your investigation being victims of the attack. Now, if you or I did something like this in America, we would be violating quite a lot of cybersecurity laws as well as the Federal Wiretap Act. But cell site simulators have been used for upwards of a decade by law enforcement and ICE, and just recently were reported to have been used on protesters. Technically, in many states, you need a warrant to use an attack like this, but many agencies can do it with only a court order, or they just do it regardless of what the Constitution allows. So sometimes you have to take things into your own hands. There are various operational mechanisms for IMSI catchers, but you generally use a high-power beacon to trick your phone into connecting. Then they downgrade your connection to an older protocol. The older, the better. 5G generally has a lot of protection against this type of thing, although it's not perfect, and a really determined and well-funded agency
Sowas passiert da sicherlich in Deutschland. Na, auf gar keinen Fall, hä?
could probably pull it off. 4G or LTE has some
Right.
notable weaknesses. 3G has terrible encryption that could be decrypted in real time, and 2G is pretty much a free-for-all. Forcing individual users into these less secure protocols makes tracking them a whole lot easier. So if you're, I don't know, at a protest or you're a person of interest for ICE, and if you notice that you have a 4G or LTE logo, there's a chance that you're connecting to a fake cell site and being tracked. If you notice that you're connecting to 3G or 2G, that's really sus, and unless you're in an extremely rural area or somewhere you'd expect to be roaming out of network, I'd recommend shutting your phone off entirely. But I still get 4G and LTE signals all the time. How can I know whether I'm connecting to T-Mobile's tower or Fascist Mobile's tower? Fortunately for us, a whole lot of
Also Team Mobile und Fascist in anderen Kategorien zu packen, ist schon wild, aber ja.
companies made
War ein Scherz, Leute. Ich glaube nicht, dass die Leute bei Team Mobile Faschisten sind. Ich mache hier Jokes.
a whole lot of portable data hotspot devices, and they essentially just act as internet routers for your Nintendo Switch or your laptop that can connect to your mobile network's data connection rather than a landline internet connection or Wi-Fi. Also, fortunately, most smartphones have this functionality built in already, so not a lot of people bought these, causing them to pile up on eBay for a small fraction of what they retailed for. And super fortunately, a lot of these hotspot devices were pretty poorly secured themselves, which enables them to be repurposed as really effective phony cell tower detectors. The EFF organizes and hosts various types of software to make this conversion as simple as possible. For my $20 Orbic, I had the option of using ADB, USB, or just connecting to the device via Wi-Fi, and I went with the latter. It only takes you a few seconds to flash the firmware, you reboot, and then you have a little line that turns green, white, or red depending on the status of nearby cell connections. You can also connect to the device with a GUI in a web browser and edit the settings, even allowing you to send notifications to your actual phone or tablet if a cell simulator is detected.
Geil, könnte ich einen Stream einbauen. Dann kann ich mir einrichten, dann kann ich hier einen Stream einbauen. Da leuchtet hier unten in der Leiste neben den Defcon-Ding einfach eine rote Lampe, wenn mein Handy abgehört wird. Ah, werdet witzig.
It's portable, it runs all day on a charge, and it costs less than a case of beer. Now imagine sitting across from your anarchist nephew on a holiday and explaining what this does as they open the box and power it on. They will talk about how fucking cool you are for the rest of your life. This one was a failure, probably due to my own lack of expertise. And one of the reasons why I'm including it here is that maybe it'll inspire somebody with that expertise to actually pull it off. That'd be awesome. So one of the things that I've been trying to do on this channel for ages is to make an accessible alternative to Spotify or digital music streaming platforms, like a Goldilocks zone of convenience, compatibility, artist support, owning the music you enjoy, and most importantly, being able to discover and listen to music on your own without an algorithm doing it for you. And there are so many devices and tools and projects available that this kind of sounds like an easy thing to curate. It is not. It is very much not. A lot of people who do this use an old computer or a mini PC and then use something like Jellyfin, or in unfortunate cases, MB or Plex, which has you paying a subscription fee to access your own files. In most cases, running a computer made for desktop use for a streaming music server is inefficient and not terribly reliable, and I'm just not satisfied with that solution. Even running a single board computer like a Raspberry Pi isn't great for this, due to the fact that the boards and storage are not meant to be on 24/7. But there is one type of inexpensive, always-on, and headless device that can run fairly complex operations.
Ich weiß nicht, was kommt. Ich dachte, vielleicht nutzt er ein N100, aber es wurde in Amerika, da juckt auch. Ein Router. Oh, ein Router könnte es sein. Ja, stimmt.
Wi-Fi routers.
Stimmt, pikant, hey. Wer kann sich
The goal
drauf
was to
kommen?
get a $30 GLINet Shadow Travel router to run a Jellyfin server. I installed some OpenWRT firmware and quickly realized that the RAM limitations alone would push it too much to be reliable. So I upgraded to the $100 Slate Axe, which kind of has a similar ecosystem but with a quad-core CPU and 512 megabytes of RAM. A few excruciating, eyeball-bleeding days later, after learning a whole lot about how routers work while trying to have a device access and launch Docker containers stored on a Linux-formatted high-speed USB drive, I realized that if I actually managed to get this to work, it probably wouldn't be the stable and reliable music server that I'm looking for. And even if I got it running and I told you to buy this exact router and give you the scripts to run, the setup process would be like 20 steps and involve you risking destroying the device. Sometimes you just have to admit defeat. What I did learn is that gl.inet Glynet. I love it when you spend so much time reading about something or researching something and never speaking to another human being about it. And months down the road, you realize that you have no idea how to pronounce it. But what I did learn is that Glynet routers are incredible for people who want to tinker. I definitely tried experimenting with my own firmware builds, and I bricked the router in the process. At one point, I literally thought it was on fire. But there's a whole alternative recovery boot mode that tries to save it and allow you to go back to stock firmware, which worked like 4 out of 5 times. But even when my dumbass pushed this device past the point where even the recovery mode wouldn't work, to my utter surprise, the user manual has a pinout of the board, which has available JTAG and UART connections, which means that I was able to manually write the stock firmware back onto the system BIOS memory chip. I simply cannot emphasize how much cooler and less wasteful the world would be if the FCC or FTC required every electronic device to have documentation and open access like this. So even though my little travel router hosted music streaming idea took a shit, this still could host media on local networks, or more importantly, easily operate as a super customizable VPN tunnel, ad blocker, or Tor router, all of which happen to be ways that anarchists like to browse the internet without their data and identity being mined for profit. So it kind of does make it to this list. I suppose it's the only currently available mass-produced line of consumer products to do so. And it's worth pointing out that I don't have any sort of relationship with the company. I'm just really horny for products that make it easy for me to modify or repair them.
Anarchism.
Anarchism.
When the average Westerner thinks of anarchism, they think of fire, overturned vehicles,
Oh, geil.
and broken windows. And while those associations are not necessarily wrong, they do require context. A good example of how context changes everything would be the case of Casey Goonan. He is accused of trying to firebomb an empty federal courthouse in Oakland during a protest. Now, it'll take you quite a bit of searching and reading between the lines to learn that this firebombing amounted to igniting a Molotov cocktail in a concrete planter near the building, destroying a shrub. He also lit a bag of Molotov cocktails on fire near a police vehicle, which may have contributed to the vehicle being burned, as apparently everybody and their mom was lighting cop cars on fire that night. Fortunately, Casey's antics didn't lead to anybody being injured, but this type of arson in California, if it leads to property damage, is punishable by 16 months in prison, and fines are up to $10,000. And Casey pled guilty to malicious damage or destruction of property by fire or explosive. But since Casey is a self-proclaimed anarchist who was protesting the Israeli occupation of Gaza, prosecutors called him a domestic terrorist, and he was sentenced to 20 years imprisonment in a specially designated communications management unit with restrictions on visitors, phone calls, and even communication with other prisoners. Maybe you're thinking what I'm thinking. It seems like over 18 years of Casey's 20-year sentence is for his beliefs, not the inarguably dumb shit that he did during the protest. Another California man
Ey, dumb shit würde ich also
received
ja.
a 20-year
50-50, ne?
sentence for his
Alter, was ist denn hier im Chat los? Nicht zu haben ist ein Zustand, den man mal annehmen und akzeptieren muss. Dann merkt man, dass man alles selbst schaffen muss. Das ist ja etwas, was ich euch vorhin anerkenne. Was?
violent actions outside of a government building at a protest. David Dempsey. Dave sprayed a police officer with pepper spray, beat him with a flagpole, and stomped on his head over 5 times among a long list of
Welches Klopapier ist vegan? Ich kaufe das von Ecolife oder so ein Scheiß.
attacks on multiple law enforcement officers at this protest. And he pled guilty to these charges, but since the riot he attended was at the Capitol building on January 6th, he received an unconditional pardon and is enjoying his freedom without a single demerit on his criminal record. The difference between these two cases, other than one person causing property damage and the other person causing injury, is entirely up here. One was on the right, one was on the left. Violent patriot, violent anarchist. And the irony is that if you strongly agree with me that this is a malpractice of justice, then you are guilty of the same crime that added 18 years to Casey Goonan's sentence, the crime of having a philosophy that dissents from your government. My goal here is not to justify violence or even lighting shrubs on fire, nor is it to convert my viewers into anarchists or even identify as an anarchist myself. I just want you to more frequently question and recognize the absurdity of institutions in your day-to-day life, because it can only benefit you to do so. I suppose this whole thing has gone on long enough, but I learned so much while making this video, and I hope some of y'all learned something from watching it. And if you couldn't tell, I love bundling things together in videos like this because a person who's looking for information on Meshtastic solar lights might be even more interested in using an SDR to pull data from satellites, or might be an expert in network hardware development who can get Jellyfin running on a router successfully, one can hope. If you want to see more videos like this and support this channel and project in general, my Patreon offers loads of released and unreleased music, sound design assets, audio production assets, and a big old friendly community. In just the last year, my Patreon members have almost exclusively enabled this channel to be able to conduct and explain research that is impacting legislation all over the country. And now that the end of the year is here, anything that doesn't carry over into future projects will go to charity. And you can join for as little as $1. Thanks for watching. Keep creating. Bye.
Hat er ein cooles Outro? Er hat kein cooles Outro? Ja, okay. Hier, cooles Outro.
Рабочей крестьянской революции, о необходимости которой все время говорит